Welcome back to Medicine for These Times. I am so honored to have Luke Kohen on. Luke was one of the very first people I ever interviewed a million years ago for a summit.
I forgot about that.
I know, and I don't even remember. I think because we have so many common connections, I have no idea how I even found you back then. But here we are, however many years later.
Decade
God,
later, at least.
I know. I was just gonna say it was like almost 10 years ago. And just so incredible to watch you grow, your
Mm.
music take off. Here you are coming to us from one of my favorite homes, my what I call my second home, Costa Rica.
Mm.
So Luke, let's get started. I would love to hear a little bit about what you do, what you're up to these days, what you've been doing, what was your path to what you're doing now, and then
Sure.
we'll get into some other things.
Yeah, happy to be here. What's up, everybody? Yeah, so my background comes from an early healing crisis. So I had a full breakdown at 22, which sort of kicked me onto the spiritual path, and that was about 20 years ago. So for me, it's been primarily retracing my lineages and going through lots of initiations with some really amazing teachers and many different lineages. And healing work has been my main focus, and that brought me to more to culture and eventually to entrepreneurship. So I've had a lot of different chapters over the last 20 years. And to kind of summarize now, for me, it is really about shifting culture on the planet. And, all the mystical stuff is amazing. It's such a deep part of me. I love it. I love the mystical. But over the last, I'd say 7 years, it's been really about how we can enjoy and inhabit our human experience and how our shared humanity allows spirituality to be more grounded. And so as part of that grounding for me was actually transitioning out of the psychedelic space and into detox work and more of the fortification, getting more in touch with my, I would say Taoist lineages. So Qigong, dark room immersions, Chinese herbs, slowing down. I got back into tea, which was where my awakening started. So yeah, so it's been a lot about moving out of stimulation and into really grounding. And so I work with a lot of leaders to help their nervous systems become more, stabilize and to increase their bandwidth to hold more, detox, get into the really juicy shadow work of where we can avoid ourselves so that we can create real projects in the world that can make impact in a positive way and not just chase the shiny spiritual carrot that's always in the future, whether you're a high performer or a mystic or there's lots of ways we can be hyper vigilant. And so my job has been to ground it all back in and really big focus on integration. So I have a lot of projects and a lot of people I support, but yeah, music is a big part of this new chapter. And yeah, just celebrating our shared humanity. How can we do that in a good way? So it's a little
Love
loose
it.
bio.
Great. Good.
More of
It's
more of a check-in than anything.
yeah, no, and it's great because I want to talk about this a little. It's interesting you mentioned shared humanity, and here I am in the US right now, and it feels like no one's sharing any humanity with each other. It's a wild world. I'm okay in it. It's kind of someone said recently, like, don't feel guilty if you feel okay. And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. But it's
Mhm.
sad to watch, it just feels like kind of like, and it's funny, as much as I love the sacred medicines and psychedelics, I believe, I hope that the path for people working with these medicines is the path inward, downward, into the
Yeah.
earth, into the grounding,
Mm.
because so many people want to do the up and out,
Yep.
the leaving,
Yep.
the other realms, but that's not the real work.
Mhm.
But let's talk about this. What do you really mean by shared humanity? And do you think it's actually possible here in the West? Is this possible in the next few years or in our future in the next 10, 15, 20 years, do you think? And what does this really mean?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely say that there's a very intentional agenda to bring us out of empathy and to move us into states of reactivity and polarization. And it really is an individual journey. Like there's not no one else can take self-responsibility for our lives except for us. And when we start to do that at a very high level, we're able to have a lot more empathy because our shared humanity for me and how it relates to like my practice and what I share is, trauma is what makes us all connected on a very weird level. It's like we're all negotiating some kind of epigenetic, passed down generational trauma. And it's that trauma that gets exploited by these agendas that pits us against each other. So if we can take self-responsibility for our trauma and start to resolve it, then we can create more safety in the world. And so obviously there's populations that don't have the privilege or the actual live safety to do the generational work. They're in the trauma now, but those that are out of it have a sacred opportunity and sacred obligation to clean up the lineage trauma that's passed down, and empathy turns on at a much higher level once we're out of, dysregulation, and we're out of the sort of programming to see other. And the seeing of other is I mean, we're indoctrinated from a very early age to see other. You
Yeah, and thank you for bringing this up. You said so many gems, and there was one in particular which I'm trying to remember what year you said this. I want to say it was 2020, maybe. It was a while ago. And I think I might have reached out to you and said, "Hey, I want you to come on my podcast and talk about it." But it was when ketamine therapy was coming out and really growing exponentially.
Mm.
And yeah, you and I feel the same
Don't
way
get me
about it.
started.
I know, I know. But it's funny because I was like, wow, he's saying exactly what I was thinking and didn't want to say, which is something Luke does.
Yeah.
But this is and here's the thing. I always say it's like there's always two sides to everything. I think it's probably great for certain reasons, for certain people and certain levels of complex traumas and PTSD. And why is it that what's legal, what's available and ready and legal out there is just all these numbing agents, like this turning off the empathy, even though it is, an empathogen. What's the right word? Empathogen.
That's
But at the
a
same
new word.
time, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what we need. We need empathogens.
But then I don't know. It's like, is it really helping or is it just another tool for tuning out and not
Yeah,
feeling?
I mean, and we have mutual friends that have a lot to say about this, and I think the main issue is recreational ketamine, and I know
Mm.
people that have benefited from clinical, 5 and then done, never touch it ever, ever, ever again. Um, and yet still, my whole thing is at this point is like, can we stop outsourcing source? Like there's other ways to do it naturally that will create a lasting foundation of a new lived reality of regulation without needing to, it's just very high risk. And this is where, like, depending how deep we want to go, the multidimensional side of it and the agendas, tied to compounds such as that one. How
I
deep do
know
we want to
there's,
go?
yeah.
How deep do we want to go to the narratives, because
Well,
there's definitely
I just
more.
interviewed Robert Forte, who spent the whole podcast talking about the other side of psychedelics that not
Right,
anybody's really talking about.
right. Yeah, so from a energy healer wisdom tradition standpoint, the elders that I trust and know, and these are tied to the Mamos and the Kogi and the Wadadikas, are warning very strongly against the use of this compound because of the synthetic nature of it and what it opens up multidimensionally. I kind of see it alongside other agendas that are designed to prep human nervous systems for AI and transhumanist timelines, and basically anything that opens us up at that level where, we call it false light in the lineages where I come from, where it's like you have this vertical line to source, and then ketamine is this kind of tilted access. So the mind disappears, which is amazing. But if you don't have a meditation background and you never experience your mind, your thoughts, sort of the cessation of thoughts through an organic process, it's like mind blowing, right? You're like, oh my God, my thoughts were gone, and it's where obviously that creates appeal, but it's a tilted access. It's not source. It's off from source. And so there can be this illumination that hooks into the identity, and the ego's like, oh, I had this ego death, like don't even get me started on that whole thing, right? So it's just high risk. I don't ever want to speak in like the absolutes, because people's lived experience is really valuable. And I know people whose lived experience of clinical use has been breakthroughs for them, but I think that there's more natural ways to get there with the right assisted therapies and other lineages. And just it feels to me like a Trojan horse into the space, from certain industries to have certain patents and certain access to certain communities for certain agendas.
I love it because it's well, you're saying a little more than what I say. I just it's interesting because yeah, I recreational is one whole shit show in itself,
Mhm.
but even therapeutic, what I started witnessing just even with, clients and former clients and clients of my clients is that the therapy became, multiple times a week doing ketamine with or without any support, and then it just kind of became like, wait a
No
second.
integration. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also like, first of all, it's also actually physically not good to be doing that much ketamine, by the way,
Right.
for years. Not just for like, oh, I'm going through something, but
Right.
I'm like, how is this any different than taking Prozac or any other antidepressant, and
Right.
maybe even worse? So and I agree. Like, I think it's time that we do question everything. Like, what is the intention? There's like so much hype around so much, like even
Yeah.
microdosing, and it's like
Yeah.
there's another side to everything, and I don't think it's like what you say. I don't think the solution is just to outsource like anything that's like really found within.
Mhm.
And it's been very interesting to watch the psychedelic realm going in that direction. And hopefully, I do believe that maybe it eventually brings people onto this path of realizing like, oh, it's all in me.
Mhm.
Um, but let's get back to this shared humanity and this culture.
Yeah.
You mentioned trauma, and of course, I think the more those of us that have done so much deep work on our trauma can start to actually perceive other human beings as like, oh, okay, that person is not out to get me or out to trigger me, but they are
Mhm.
actually just, in their trauma pattern reacting like everybody else is.
Right.
Um, so how can we as a collective, like, what do you think the solution is for this? Like, is there a possibility that we can actually have that shared humanity? How do you
Yeah,
think it's going to get done?
I think there's like, different ways of approaching that, from micro cosmic constellations of people coming into connection and really addressing, this from like a family constellation point and unraveling the deep triggers that the collective waves sort of poke, because some of the characters on the world stage and some of the circumstances poke us in that ancestral or familial trauma or even our soul's history. It could poke there's different degrees of trauma and how it shows up. And so, there's individual work we can do, there's group work we can do, and then on a collective level, I think it's part of the sort of disillusionment and collective awakening around discovering, oh wait, there's actually some very specific agendas that are trying to create these different subgroups to be polarized by each other. Like, here's the line in the sand that's drawn, and then there's no potential empathy for the other group because what it pokes and where the identity sort of double downs is like a non-negotiable. But if you were to take away the subject matter and just get into the feelings, you can actually end up having empathy for someone else's lived experience by instead of, it's not so much what they believe, but why they believe what they believe. Of like, oh, I hear that you feel really unsafe and really passionate, and this is what you believe you need to do to protect your family or whatever it is. Like, we can have empathy for each other's emotional experience, um, if we strip away the ideology and the rigid, belief systems, because it's really in identity and belief where the need to defend comes online, and people are so identified with their ideologies, which we're conditioned to be. It's part of how it's sort of the Western colonial, post-colonial world is like literally breeds a type of narcissistic blind spot in the collective culture. And so people's identities get sort of enmeshed with their political associations or their religious or their whatever their worldview and spiritual, like unintegrated spiritual nonsense. And so if we can be willing to take enough steps back to get curious about someone's lived experience, that's how we can start to repair. It's like if I were to sit down in a room with someone who was either very identified as left or very identified as right, or if they were a very, whatever they were identified with, and if we didn't talk about that and they just shared their story with me, like this is what I've survived, like I've lost my wife or I lost my kid or whatever they've been through, I would be like, oh my God, like what a beautiful soul that survived so much shit. But the moment they started talking about how they think so and so is going to save or so and so's the devil, whatever, that's where it could be like, whoa, 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 your belief is so different than mine. I cannot relate to you anymore. But there's always a through line to how we can relate, and it's through the lived experience of pain and our shared pain that there's a possibility to have empathy for someone else's experience. But as long as we're in reactivity, as long as we're in any frequency of hate, and this is where it's very sneaky that these sort of egregors, these sort of larger spiritual forces hook into someone's nervous system or move through an individual where in their blind, and it's in their blind spot. And this is where, again, it's like, oh, wow, like that thing has overtaken your nervous system. I'm not dealing with the individual. I'm dealing with this larger spiritual pattern coming through this individual right now. Let me recognize that, take a little space and let them come back. Again, I've had this with family. I've had this with friends where I can see their eyes change
Mm.
and they click over into a different state of being when the sort of the ideology button's poked and the identity comes on. And that's when you disengage. That's when you don't try to convince. That's when you don't try to defend. You just listen. You're like, wow, I'm noticing like how angry you are right now, and like I'm here to actually hear what you care about. Would you be willing to just like whatever? It's you have to get very tactful in how you navigate people's emotional charge without becoming a target, without becoming a place for them to just dump into your nervous system and your energy field. Like there's tactful ways of tai chiing energy, as long as you're not trying to convince or make wrong. If you actually want to have the experience of empathy for other people, you have to practice it. And a lot of it stems from having empathy for our own pockets of survival. Like if you haven't sat with areas of pain that you've shut away or you've tucked under the rug, it's very hard to be with the pain of someone else, right? And so again, it's going to take each individual, them doing subgroup work where, like I've been a part of a race and reconciliation circle. I don't know if over the years with my friend Swadi, who's from South Africa, it's people that want to meet the more charged content matter with the willingness to learn and grow and be exposed to people that think differently and feel differently than them and just like actively choose to discover your shared humanity. Like that's people have to prioritize shadow work. It's not like a glamorous thing. It's not something that people would like normally seek out because it's freaking uncomfortable and confronting, especially to be like, and this is part of the phenomena of the cultural framework and systems that we're in, is that we're all our algorithms, all our thing, it's echo chambers. You're with this echo chamber, people that reinforce your little safe worldview. You're in this echo chamber. So like for me, as a unifier, as a heretic investigator, as a world bridger, I'm constantly trying to get out of my comfort zone and be in other subcultural places and ask questions and get curious and just keep an open mind and explore, oh, this is why they think what they think and feel what they feel. Like I can actually appreciate the unconscious driver to their ideology and have empathy for that, as opposed to just making their belief wrong, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God. I know, and it's so interesting, and I think that's why when I opened, I said I feel good, is because that's something throughout the last, I mean, even before 5 years ago, the last 10 years, as I started encountering just this depth of how different we are, and also doing my own work, like you said, it's like, oh, okay, once I truly understood all my trauma and all my patterns that were really running my life and really studied them on the next level, it's like, oh, I can see this in everybody.
Totally.
And we can see it in groups. And like you just said, how it creates these, the separation. And, you know, it's been challenging at times to, especially depending on where one lives or who they're hanging out with. It's like I'm in the minority sometimes where I live, and I've lost friends over the last few years, and it's
Sure.
unfortunate. It's sad,
Many
and
people have. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, sometimes I don't know why, but I have, it's like pretty obvious why. But that was my dedication, was like, you know what? I am not going to just keep operating with the separation, but I'm just going to send them love and send them compassion, and really be willing to. I say I have friends, I have clients, like people that are on all sides with completely different beliefs, and somehow we can all get along because there's a shared purpose. But when you had said something about these spiritual forces, and I've questioned this for a long time, like what is at the root of all of this?
Mm.
And for me, it's a lot of this collective, like need to belong, right? There's so much disconnection. No one's feeling safe. People haven't done that deeper work to really feel safe within themselves, feel safe on earth.
Hmm.
Like this deeper place of like the very like root chakra work, like going in and trusting this journey of being human. But what do you think these spiritual forces really are? Like what is happening on a larger scale when people are veering off into their little identity groups and, fighting with each other and creating as I say, it's like we're literally perpetuating war every day. It's like we
Yeah,
want the wars to stop, but we're just creating more war every single day.
yeah. I mean, from my understanding, again, we can look at this from a varying lens, from a more alternative historical. We can go from like a mythological. Depends on what vantage point you want to look at to answer your question, right? So, um, like let's just look at the Roman Empire, which introduced the monkey mind to the planet. This conquesting force that basically is the spawn of a type of colonization that was introduced to the planet that eventually led to another form of colonization, right? Like the displaced people ended up becoming the displacer of people, right? And so if we look at that sort of mythology of like, okay, wow, like Rome conquered the Germanic tribes of Europe, and like the European body that was once, in these, pagan nature-based, pathways from the Druids, the Celts, to the Gaul Empire, like all these different empires that existed before Rome, they lived in very different culture, very different framework of reality. And this sort of power dynamics that have happened from Rome is basically there's been a split between the pursuit of mysticism and the pursuit of control. So we can kind of boil it down to this pursuit of, and when we say mysticism, meaning I want to be in harmony with creation. Let's just call it that. I want to know my place within the universe, and cultures that have this, you're raised in an initiatic process to bring you more and more into the truth of that experience. This is your place within the universe. Let's help you discover it even more and more, and then it can ripple out into the tribe and into the society, right? So we veered off from that into this power over dynamic that was spawned from Rome. So we can, from that sort of historical lens, see where it was from. But if you want to go into the deeper side, you can look at sort of the Steiner work and the egregores of the harmonic forces and luciferic forces and aeonic forces, and these sort of bigger wetiko from indigenous mythology, the haole of the Hawaiian culture, these different, understandings that there's a type of spiritual sickness that came over this world, and the pursuit of materialism and the pursuit of externalization of basically leaving the garden towards this externalized experience in a way that's literally the opposite of the harmony of knowing one's place within the universe. It is varying degrees of inception of waking up from a dream, waking up from a dream, waking up a dream. So there's no memory of an ancestor. Like that's how many layers of inception that we've been in for certain generations now. What we see in the colonized world now is we see the most recent pattern of it in the last 500 years. And so native peoples and a lot of peoples of color, we're seeing the generational thing that we actually experienced with Rome thousands of years ago, the echo of it showing up in our timeline. And so those of us that have had the privilege and the support to unearth our generational trauma and safety can see, oh shit, my ancestors in Ireland went through this conquesting, severing of loss of language, loss of culture, loss of spiritual practice, loss of connection to the land, displaced, and then no memory of an ancestor, no memory of practice, no memory of. I talk about this in my spoken word. You need to hear this, tying it all back to this is the shared trauma of humanity. If we're gonna say what connects us, is the wound of colonization that goes back to Rome and how it's echoed through time till now. And so it's pretty deep because those egregores feed off of separation. Wetiko feeds off of shadow projection, greed, narcissism, these kinds of collective phenomena that we're dealing with in varying shades of degree. The Luciferic principle of false light, of, people that start to get into spirituality and then their identity kind of takes that spirituality and hijacks it for their own unconscious agendas, right? Like just because someone's doing yoga doesn't mean that they're, an awakened being or in harmony or decolonizing their consciousness or doing their shadow work. Just someone's drinking medicine, same thing. So we're in this sort of stage of, all these different prophecies and different lineages that are speaking to this time where the sort of veils are starting to thin and we're peeling back the layers of like, oh my God, the things that I thought is so far removed from what I thought it was. The breakdown of mythology, the breakdown of culture, the breakdown of what's actually been incepted on humanity. It goes very, very deep. And that if you do that too quickly, you will burn out nervous systems. If you do that too fast, you will literally that's how some people go into spiritual psychosis. This is how, because the veils get ripped back and they're like, wow, everything I taught was a lie. And like everything that I know about my religion or my identity or my culture, the society is really very, very opposite of what I was taught. And that can be shocking. So, you know, again, these spiritual forces require us to be out of our God self in reactivity because and this is the wild thing is like when you go through the layers of it and you're like, oh my God, just a bunch of divine beings out there that forgot they're divine and are playing, are in such a deep layer of inception that they're functioning from 1 degree off of entity consciousness or 1 degree off of animal consciousness or 1 degree off of whatever you want to name it. And that was intentional. It was to steer them into that level of frequency and vibration so that they're so far from the knowledge of themselves as a multidimensional being. Because if the collective knows that they're divine and multidimensional, those that want power, they're out of their job. They're out of, they've lost control. So all the systems that have been put in place have been designed to suppress the truth of who we are as divine beings, the level of co-creative power that we possess as souls, and the truth of our ancestral lineages, because when we reconnect with that, we naturally want to be in harmony. We naturally want to love other people. We naturally want to provide food, shelter, show up for our fellow man. And we now transcend a certain level of duality consciousness where we don't want to. I know that if I'm in reactivity and shadow projecting on other, that I'm feeding the egregor of Wetiko. Like I'm giving Wetiko energy if I'm moving into greed, if I'm moving into withholding, if I'm moving into power over, if I'm moving into any of the collective shadows that have infiltrated and infested the human spirit and human consciousness. I know exactly what that feeds. So at some point, you have to break those agreements and be willing to be like, I'm not going to feed this thing anymore, and see it. And you can see it come through other people. You can see it show up into a collective group. You could see that, oh wow, that person has entered cult consciousness and is running a harem. Yeah, no, thank you. Like they're not actually living the way that they're appearing. That's false light, right? And so there's there's degrees to this game. There's degrees and there's levels to this whole journey in consciousness. And the hope that I feel, and this is in my design, my motivation is hope, is to give hope to the people, is that everything that's being run on the planet, all the agendas that are being rolled out, expedite our awakening process through that sacred contrast. So sometimes if everything was just peaceful and chill and we didn't have any conflict, we didn't have any like stressors pressing on us, there's no dynamic alchemy or tension for the soul to evolve. So we all signed up for this, whether we remember it or not. We signed up for this experience together, and we're all on the same boat, Mother Earth, in this profound moment of a transmutational process of our DNA. And so there's energies that know that we're in this moment of time that have agendas for control and don't want us to be remembering our God self, God goddess self, our divinity, whatever you want to call it. And remember that we are multidimensional beings, because if we do, we can really shift this whole boat and create a culture where, you know, uh, we're really honoring that truth that's beyond separation. Yeah.
Thank you. Wow. So beautifully said. I'm wondering, do you feel like we're gonna witness this in our lifetime? You and I are probably near age. Like, what do we have? 50, 60 more years left to our life?
Depends on if you're getting into your stem cells, if you're healing. I think that we're going to see tremendous healing technology that is beyond our wildest conceptions. Things are coming back from other civilizational timelines that we've had at one point that slows the aging process. I think we'll see so much in our lifetime that we can't even fathom it right now. And in terms of like the collective tipping over into a critical mass of awakening, I believe we're in the purification stage of the prophecies, as my elders talk about it, and a lot of people want to skip over to the renewal phase. They're just like 5D Earth, new Earth, which is great that you're on the other side of the bridge and you're building that technology. But a lot of us, we have to build the bridge first. So some people are on the other side of the bridge in game A, building the foundational, grounded structure that can hold the bridge up. Then there's people that are on the middle of the bridge that are like, come on, guys, there's a sacred fire on the other side. You'll remember your pre-colonial consciousness of your ancestors. It's really peaceful over here. It's a good dream on this side. Come on over. We're gonna teach you how to pray, and you're gonna feel more alive than ever.
I wish I could show you a journal entry. I literally just saw this the other day and I was like, oh yeah, I remember writing that. Almost literally that
Yeah.
exact language.
And then you have people on the other side of the bridge that are waiting. They're like gonna just be the welcoming community. Like, oh my God, you're okay. It's okay. That was really hard. What a nightmare. And then there's people that hold all three. I'm in the category of on all three sides of the bridge. I'm in the middle. I'm in the game A. I'm in game B. I'm doing the best I can to fortify the bridge and walk across it and interact with communities that have no idea about my wizardry and just think I'm a bro or a hip hop artist or like an entrepreneur, whatever lens that they're looking through my projection field as a heretic investigator. So um yeah, which is fun for me at this point because I don't really care how I'm perceived anymore. So it's fun. It's like, oh, cool. You want to put me in that bar? I'll meet you where you are, buddy. So it's interesting. And, I do think that we're going to see massive advances in all of it and also regression. So there's going to be hubs that pop up that are really, have that level of new energy systems, of healing systems, of deep safety children incarnating into those little villages that will have no framework of war in their minds and horrible things happening simultaneously. So while we're in this purification stage, bringing all the messery to the surface, all of it that has existed through time is shown up here for us to look at as a collective, and it's to jumpstart as many souls to do their work as much as possible, and if enough souls do that, where we get to hold the field together. So it's really about building coherence, and there's a really good story for this evolutionary process that we're in that I mean it's a short story on my YouTube that's more cool, but I can summarize it now. If you ever heard the story of the imaginal cells.
The
Yeah.
goo.
You know this one?
Yeah, well, I know the gist of like what actually happens, but yes, I wrote
Right.
about it last year because I was like, oh, it's like the goo.
The goo. So for those of you
And
who are
the
that
cells are fighting. It's
yeah,
like they're fighting,
yes,
fighting.
yeah. So I'll break it down really quick. I'll do a very
Please do.
summarized, fun version because just for sake of time. So you have the caterpillar, which is eating its environment. So they're consuming about 40 times its body weight, which from the outside looking in, just like humanity, very destructive, right? Destroying the ecosystem. Bad caterpillar, consuming everything, destroying. And then there's something inside of that caterpillar that is the blueprint of the DNA of the butterfly. It doesn't exist. It exists as a potentiality, but it's not visible yet. And the cells that hold the blueprint of that butterfly are called the imaginal cells. And so that caterpillar is consuming, just like humanity. And then something clicks on and says, go inward. Go inward. And it starts to create this cocoon. It goes into this evolutionary transmutational process. And inside the cocoon, there is a battle between the caterpillar DNA and the butterfly DNA. And the caterpillar DNA literally thinks that the caterpillar DNA, the butterfly DNA is a foreign virus and is trying to destroy it. And the way that the imaginal cells survive the onslaught of caterpillar DNA is that they create small clusters of coherence and build healthy cell membranes, like boundaries, essentially. And as the caterpillar DNA tries to penetrate those little cell walls, they inoculate one caterpillar cell at a time. And it becomes an imaginal cell. Not like cancer because it's not entropic, it's life affirming, right? So it's not like but it can look similarly in that sense of it's inoculating multiple cells. When it crosses critical mass, everything turns to mush. That's the goop. And that's the critical mass phase of everything inside the cocoon. Then there's this beautiful process where a new being is being formulated, and the butterfly forms inside the goop. Lungs triple in size, wings form, and then this beautiful resistance happens, and it breaks through. And now that being is symbiotic with the environment. It's a pollinator, so it's life affirming. It's no longer entropic. It's no longer consuming. It's pollinating. It's spreading. It's bringing its unique puzzle to the larger wholesome nature of the creation. So that's what we're in. That's what we're going through. It's a perfect metaphor for the evolution of consciousness and the literally transmutational process that we're in. So I trust the process, and that not in like that phrase has been hijacked by certain movements. Trust the process. But there is truth to trusting the process, not in putting your faith into something outside, but trusting life itself, that nature is intelligent and knows what it's doing, and that God doesn't play with its creation. It doesn't play. And there's always a self-correcting part of the journey, and that we need to start to trust the visions that we've had placed in our own souls for what's possible. For them, as Charles Eisenstein says, the more beautiful world we know is possible. We all have our slice of that. We all have our slice of the sacred wound that we're carrying, of the unprocessed collective trauma, lineage trauma, planetary trauma, nation trauma, regional trauma, family trauma, whatever. And then we also have our slice of the sacred solution to that, within the larger pattern of creation. So it's both. And so the transmutational process is not glamorous. It is messy. It is ugly. It is purification. It is, you know
Not
what I mean?
easy, not fun.
Not
Although
all just
it can be
not all
fun.
white robes and mala beads, yo. It's good, purge buckets, right? So,
Purge buckets. Oh my God, this is hilarious. By the way, I recommend everybody plant some milkweed.
mm,
Because I had written about this last year, and then a few months later, I actually witnessed a monarch caterpillar
ooh,
take hold and like build its little or landed on my deck and go through that whole phase. And I watched it day by day by day. And
wow.
then when it
What a
hatched, I
gift.
happened to see it come right out. And then
I think
they
I remember
can't,
you sharing a story
yeah,
about
yeah, they
yeah.
can't
And I was like,
fly for like
what a
90 minutes. So it was like walk,
it's
and
like
I was like, whoa, like
perched.
what? Shh.
Yeah. Wow.
And they're like gooey. But that is a great analogy. And I think, like you just said, the trusting the process. I know it's all these really good catch terms have become, just
Hijack.
these,
Yeah.
yeah, hijacked little Instagram, and they're, now they're becoming memes, including your own. But the reality is, it is like, this is why, when I remember in 2020 when the pandemic hit, it was like, oh, there it is. Like, it was just like, oh, like, I think some of us kind of knew something was coming. It's been predicted for
Mm-hmm.
many years, and
Mm-hmm.
astrology is literally written about it. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just like a peace. And it's not to say I'm happy with the way the world is or happy with wars, but there is a deeper liberation with knowing like there's something at work here. Like you said, like it's like the imaginal cells, and that purge process. And I think for those that have worked with medicines and been through some kind of like actual like knowing what's happening in that purification, and this, it's not just medicine work, it's shadow
Yeah.
work, all the inner work.
All of it. And some people, are going to be called to the front line side of it in the physical world, on the ground, setting boundaries with these old energies. They're even like, no, caterpillar, you cannot eat this tree anymore. Boundary. Like, and other people are going to be doing it in consciousness, and then, you know, planting seeds of awareness inside of that caterpillar, and it starts to metamorphosize into a butterfly, right? So there's degrees of density, and we have different stations in creation. Some people are assigned to a very frontline existence, and I've been in phases of my journey where that was what called me. The kind of activism that I was being asked to do at that time, and fight for our water, and the reality is, it's like you see it on Instagram right now. You'll see like, oh wow, like the fires in LA, or oh wow, the hurricanes in Asheville, until that phone is in your backyard. And so none of us is going to get out of this fully unscathed from the changes that are coming, whether that's emotional, physical, spiritual, or otherwise. And that alchemical process is profound. And we get to learn how to work together. Like the silver linings of like Asheville FEMA was like, whoa, y'all are one of the most resilient communities we've ever seen. The level of organization that happened there. LA, people come together, it's like, and what was happening during that time, as an example of Asheville, you had right-wing people and hippie liberal, like and they're just all having a barbecue together, like
Yeah.
feeding each other. You know what I mean? Like all that shit goes out the window when there's like a real catastrophe. So again, every agenda that comes to try to mess stuff up, only quickens our the higher qualities start to come through in crisis. You get to really see what a community is, what a culture is in crisis. And there's systems that are not going to last and endure, and they're going to fall away. And a lot of people are going to have a hard adjustment period. If you're very dependent on comfort and Amazon deliveries and other things, and you're going to have a pattern interruption eventually. You get ready, to the Western world, get ready for some real inconvenience, y'all. You know?
Pattern interruption. That's a good way to put it. I just figure,
Yes.
like, you know what? If it really takes us to get to that point of like, you know,
The
being
brink of
pushed, yeah,
destruction.
like it needs to be, we need to be pushed to the ultimate edge because it's true for those of us. I mean, I remember I've lived through a lot of crises, oddly, like,
Yeah,
major earthquakes, nine
yeah,
11.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
the blackout in New York City. It was like, we all get along when it comes down to human survival in community. And it
Hmm.
doesn't matter what side you're on when it's like a storm or everybody loses power or everybody's out of food. And that's where Asheville was like, yeah, well, we have to figure it out because
Hmm.
what are you going
You
to
don't
do?
have a
Like,
choice.
not give water to your neighbor because they support Trump, like God help us if we get to that point. But which maybe, who knows?
I think there's intentions to bring people to that level of reactivity. And again, for people that are identifying in that, if you are in reactivity at that level, you are in a level of entity consciousness.
Mm.
You're in an animal vibration. You're not in your humanity anymore. Sorry. And so there's a lot of justified viciousness based on, that if the perpetrator, victim, rescuer triangle is the karmic entanglement, is the samsara of humanity. And we have to each be willing to break the cycle of that
Mm.
in order to participate in the potentiality of our divine expression. Like we all have that latent potential in us, every single human being. Even Trump, even Biden, they have
Yeah.
that latent potential inside of them. Is it something that they're tending to? Probably not, but that potential lives there. And so we really get to hold um, a very powerful stance inside of consciousness, you know, and be willing to see that divinity in other people. It's very difficult at times. I still get triggered. You're online and
You
someone's
get triggered,
oblivious.
yeah?
Yeah, it's like when someone's like my triggers are like when someone's completely oblivious of their own space and they're just like wander into when you're like shopping and they're just like in their own world and they're like, oh, sorry, you didn't exist because they're just in their own world like that. The lack of
No
awareness can be,
presence
yeah,
whatsoever.
it's like a version. It's symbolic for that in another regard. I get angry when I drive sometimes. Like the New Yorker comes out, what are you doing? I'm walking over here. It's like, it's we all have a version like I'm walking over here. We get like, hey, I exist. We're coexisting in time and space. Please be aware. There are other human beings here. It's not just about you. Again, it's like the blind spot of narcissism.
Oh my
So,
God.
and we all got our little slice of it, and we get to work it out. So, anyway, I think we're getting to that time.
No, no. It's funny because online you've been very just outspoken for ever since I've been following you, like not afraid of what people think and be willing to say things that are maybe uncomfortable for a lot of people. And yeah, people react without reading the whole thing or without knowing who you actually are. And I mean, I even get this, and I'm not even like half as controversial as you are. And I'm like, wow,
I don't
where
even
did
think about these things. I'm not like, am I really that controversial? I
I
forget
mean,
because
but you know what I mean? Like, I don't really like stir people up enough, which is why I don't have as many followers as you have.
no.
But it is interesting because people just jump to these conclusions. I mean, this is where I've lost even friends, like sadly good friends that just wrote me off like because I shared, multiple RFK posts or whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Mhm.
But yeah, and then, I'm curious, like the internet, and I made a joke to you, I think just yesterday or the day before, where it was like, hey, you're still on Instagram. Like you and I and a lot of people we know are out there like, kind of with this probably weird relationship, right? Like, how do we interact with media and technology, especially as the world changes, with
It's,
AI and God knows what's going to happen next?
it's
What's
real.
your relationship to this, and how do we, again, like, be in right, like, walk with it skillfully, where it's like, okay, it
Yeah,
could be used as the bridge communication, right? Like the
right,
bridge, the role, which is, by the way, how I've seen it since day one. Is like, oh,
right.
it's here as this beautiful tool for awakening, and it's also a beautiful tool for showing
Yeah,
us our demons, right?
yeah. I mean, there's a really good podcast on the Emerald episode
Mm.
about the like guardians and
Oh yeah.
gatekeeper. I forget the name of it, but he talks about getting into Instagram like almost like prayer and ceremony, like you're going into like an astral dimension. Just be really intentional. Like my whole thing around it is if you're not adding value or learning, get out. If you're
Well,
not there to
most people
connect
are
and
just
be,
consuming, right?
yeah, well, that's
Consumers.
what I mean. So you talk about having a healthy relationship with it. There it is. If you're not learning or adding value or in actual connection, get out. And so we have to track our own, like the dopamine level stuff is real. I mean, I've had my phases of being completely addicted and having to like manage it, like, take long breaks, get out in nature. It's all about a balance, but you're right. It is a tool. And I think that there's going to be a population of people. I mean, during one of the good things that happened during the panini was that a bunch of people started to garden, you know, like gardening blew up all over. Like there was all this gardening starting to happen. So like, I think a lot of souls are starting to get that there's not a deep satisfaction in some of these things. And we're a lot of us are here for that, like what is actually going to bring me satisfaction? What is actually going to light me up and bring me into a true path of fulfillment? And there's only so much interfacing with technology you can do in a day without it having like a negative impact on your neurology and biology and so yeah, it's each of us to manage, especially those who are neurodivergent on any level. Like it's high risk. You have to manage it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also neurodivergent. That's an interesting one. I'm like, like, what does that really mean? Because doesn't I feel like all of humanity is, quote, neurodivergent. So is it divergent
Well, you
from
have
anything?
neurotypical people.
It's like,
You have brains that are not divergent. Yeah. I think we all have the
who?
capacity for to be psychic, and
You know,
we all have different skill sets of levels of intuition that we have on unlock. But there are different brain type wirings, just like there's different human design. Sort of, some 3% of the population are reflectors,
mm,
30% are projectors, 70% are generators. It's we get to honor the uniqueness and the similarities. Like unity and diversity. It's and learn that about ourselves and each other.
yeah.
It's actually where the juice is.
Yeah.
Why I
What's
love
your
human
human
design.
design?
I'm a 5/1 manifesting generator, emotional authority. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Manifesting generator in the house.
Managing. Here to do at least 8 things. And that's trimmed it down from 16 to 8.
Oh my God. It's like, it's so intense. I'm like, gosh, I have to remind myself to say no to some things.
Oh yeah. Just because
But
you
I
can't
don't
live a dream
know.
so
It's like I thrive off of it. I can like I don't even know. I have so much space. My life is very spacious and it's so like full that I'm like, "Oh, this is just that path. Like I'm like, what would I be like if I only had one thing going on?"
totally. I get jealous of people that have like that one niche and like, I just do this. And I'm like, good for you. I'm too multidimensional. I'm like, oh my God, here we go.
Well,
But
let's jump
let's
and we can
bookmark it.
revisit this another time. Maybe I'll see you in Costa Rica if you're only going to be there a month. Who knows? I might be there
Yeah.
sometime in the next few weeks. But
You posted. Yeah.
Luke, it was so good to finally catch up.
Yeah. Awesome.
Very, very enlightening and informative. And hopefully you'll still be on social media when this comes out so people can follow
I
you.
will. I will. I'm winding off. For me, I'm gonna keep my thing up and I'm gonna delegate the content. I just personally won't be interfacing with the device. That's my over the year, but I need to train up my assistant and do all that kind of stuff. So my goal is to be off there, not interfacing, but still adding value. And I have a free community for those of you listening. I want to get I can't have this level of conversation on IG. Like I can't.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I have to be off there to be able to talk about things that really matters to me. So
Well, send me
yeah,
the link to your free community and we'll promote it for this with this. 'Cause I
sounds
don't remember
good.
where it is, but
All good. You can just go through all my stuff. It's all there.
thank you
Yeah.
so much, Luke. It was so good to talk to you. And yeah, let's be back in touch very soon.
Sounds
Have a
good. Appreciate
beautiful
you,
day.
Beth. Thanks
We
everybody for
appreciate
listening.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.